and I welcome you to the high school in the town of Oyster Bay. This is the Oyster Bay School District. They are our hosts for the evening, the afternoon actually. See, you get think for the evening. It's an afternoon. And we're here to engage in a conversation. Basically, we know that there are issues outstanding relative to the new curriculum in the Common Core, with the testing and so forth. People are concerned. And we're here to hear. I have some friends who are with me today, and from right to left as I face you, from left to right as you face them, Dr. Merrill Tisch, who's the head of the Board of Regents, Dr. John King, who is our Commissioner of Education, and Regent Roger Tillis. I don't know if he's a doctor or not. And are you a doctor?
I'm the kind that can't help it.
Okay. Okay. But Roger and I have been friends for many, many years. As all these people are, they're concerned about education, they care, and we're here to listen, with the emphasis on listen. My guests will be taking notes. We have representatives from the State Education Department here who will be taking notes. We have microphones set up on either side. I have staff people here who will guide you to them. We ask that you keep your comments and statements as limited as you can make them. We're not going to give you a time limit. I'm not going to hold up a sign and say 30 seconds left or anything like that. But if you see me approaching you, I'm not looking for a glass of water. What we'd like to do is keep the conversation moving. Our guests will be taking notes, and then we'll give responses towards the end of the event. When you've finished your statements and questions, we'll be writing them down. They'll be writing them down. And then we will respond to them towards the end of the meeting. We're here officially till about, Superintendent? About 4:30, 5 o'clock? 4:45 is a good time, and that's when we have to vacate. So if the clock is right there, then we're going to be mindful of that and keep it moving, okay? We have some media in the room. They asked to come. We did not ask media in. I did not send out a press release on this event. I'm not looking to make it a media event. This is to be a conversation, as I said before, between you, my constituents, and the people who run the education and are responsible for making sure that our children, your children, are properly educated. And it's something we have to remember, that while teachers are in the classroom, they're also parents. They also have kids of their own, many of them in our schools on Long Island and in the area. So when they speak, in many cases, they're speaking both as teachers, professionals in the field. I was one of you for 20 years in the city of New York. I taught biology at Grover Cleveland High School, and I was the assistant principal for administration for 3 years at Grover Cleveland as well. I think our superintendent was the chairperson at the English department, right? English. After I left, but she did a better job without me there. In any event, if anyone would like to engage and speak and make a statement, please come up to the microphones on either side to do that now. I'm going to recognize you. Are we shy? Come on. Come on down. This will be 20% of your evaluation. Okay, can we start over here?
Hi.
Please identify yourself and what school district you're from.
Hi, I'm Mia Ramirez, and I live in Oyster Bay, but I'm also a teacher and a parent of 2 children, kindergarten and 2nd grade. First, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to express concerns and frustrations that we have both as parents and as teachers. I first want to say that I agree in theory with the idea of Common Core as a way to be sure that there's equity among the states. However, I'm really concerned about the developmental appropriateness of the standards themselves, and particularly in New York State, a personal concern of mine is the cutoff date for kindergarten entrance. In many of the states the cutoff date is somewhere around September. I feel that it really significantly impacts the children that we have in New York State, that the deadline is in December. I have an October birthday child who is not developmentally ready for kindergarten, and if nationally we are going and moving toward these national standards, New York State students are at a disadvantage by having such a different cutoff date. Two other very quick points.
That is the first time anyone has brought that point up. I want to thank you for that.
I really had to do a lot of research because I'm justifying why I'm sending my child to a West Hills Montessori school for kindergarten, and then we'll be repeating him hopefully in the public school next year. I will tell you though that if I had the finances to send my child to Montessori or to a public school going forward, I would. And that makes me really sad because Dr. Melnick knows that I've been a teacher for a really long time and I've really served my students well. And it's my turn. It's my turn as a parent to take advantage of the public school system, and I feel really disappointed. And let me just tell you two quick reasons why. One, the developmental inappropriateness of the Common Core is creating children who don't have the opportunity to love learning. There is no time to love to read. There's no time to investigate, be curious, discover. There isn't that time. The things that we're expecting them to do not allow for them to actually master what they really need to be focused on, because we need to move them on, because now we have to move on to something else. And I don't think this is a matter of time, that if you have more time and it will just catch up over the next few years, I don't see that happening. The second point is the focus on testing. We're teaching children how to bubble. That's not a good use of an elementary school child's time. And I will have to say that we are trying very hard to make this palatable for everyone, but there's just no way to make something that's inappropriate in terms of the content, to make it really palatable for children. And what makes me really sad is that I think that if you don't give children the chance to be kids when they're kids, then they will find a way to sow those wild oats later on. And we're finding that over and over, there are more children who are immature later on because they don't have the chance to work out those social skills, to work through what it means to have work ethic and discipline in doing their homework, because it's so overwhelming, they give up. I don't want my personal children to feel that. And I'm watching colleagues cry because they feel what they're doing, what they feel compelled to do for their children is abusive to their students. They feel it's abusive. But we are employees, and we want to do what's expected. So I'm sorry it took a lot longer than I thought.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Tony Lavati, and I am trustee on the Board of Education in the North Shore Central School District. But first and foremost, I'm a parent. I have an elementary school and a middle school student, and I thought long and hard about what I wanted to say today. So I'm going to read it. You'll have to excuse me, but I did write it earlier. In the legal community, when a child's welfare is discussed by a court, the actions taken are always in the best interest of the child. But why in public education are we not putting our students and children first? Why are politicians, corporations, and money taking a precedent over our students? With the changes in yearly state testing and the APPR, you have forgotten the student. You now ask New York State public school students to shoulder the weight of their district's reputation, their community's property values, and now their teacher's evaluation. And you ask this with an unfair test in an elementary school in particular, where it's developmentally inappropriate material. Just what our teacher just told us. And I'm not in the classroom, but I hear it. I hear it as a board member, I hear it as a parent. With an already excellent school district that we have, North Shore District is an excellent school district with high-performing students and teachers. Why not consider partnering our high-performing school districts with lower-performing school districts instead of bringing all of our students down? The Common Core wants us to create critical thinkers for a 21st century world. They cannot do this if they're burned out, stressed out, and hate learning. Thank you.
Dr. Huntington, you were approaching before?
I'm Anna Huntington. I'm the superintendent of schools in Locust Valley. I'm accompanied by my board president, Suzanne Squelia, and two of our parent leaders, Haley Byron and Maureen Lee Antonio. I'm very grateful that the three of you came, and in particular to Senator Marcelino, who has tried repeatedly to open dialogue, not only locally and within his district, but also by bringing some of us up to Albany in an attempt to communicate up there. We share Senator Marcelino's concern about the implementation of the Common Core. It weighs very heavily on us. I did prepare some statements only because I'm so concerned that I'll forget to mention something that's representative of the concerns of my board and of the district which I represent. Before the release of the latest state assessment data, the Locust Valley Board of Education unanimously passed a very important resolution, which I will share with those of you at the dais and the senator when I conclude my remarks. In it, our board echoes the widespread concern of parents, students, and faculty regarding an ongoing overemphasis on high-stakes testing by the state education department, the impact of APPR on teachers and principals, and the impending imposition of PARCC, which will require that all Common Core assessments be taken online simultaneously in districts across New York State. Not included in the resolution, but a very serious concern to all of us, is the sale by the State Education Department of student data from state assessments to In Bloom and other vendors without parent notification or consent. In retrospect, our board's concerns were not only timely and justified, but actually understated in light of the troubling realities which continue to unfold around us. Dramatic statewide decreases in student achievement on state assessments based on the Common Core standards have given new meaning to high-stakes testing in New York. In fact, the stakes have become the highest and have provoked some of the most adverse reactions on the parts of students, parents, educators, and boards of education that we can remember. Ironically, lower test scores this year are not due to declines in student performance, not ineffective efforts to align curricula with the Common Core. Despite significant shifts to skills and concepts, which we all know differed greatly from those which the State Education Department valued and measured just 1 year ago, the new Common Core standards were measured prematurely, without adequate time for professional development and curriculum writing, without time for controlled piloting on a small scale before large-scale implementation took place, and before adequate time could be devoted to related teaching and learning, which were requisite to achieving the alleged desired outcomes. These omissions were compounded by the imposition of new restrictive cut points to determine proficiency and mastery in English language arts and mathematics. By design, these new cut points made the attainment of previous levels of achievement difficult, if not impossible, for most children. Despite the fact that this past spring, many students earned test scores which were consistent with or actually higher than those attained on assessments 1 year earlier, the imposition of the new cut points produced a dramatic increase in the number of students performing below proficiency. The imposition of these new cut points also ensured that comparisons regarding student growth from 1 year to another would be virtually impossible. An analysis of our Locust Valley student achievement data provides important insights into the real impact of the cut points and the assessments on children. Despite the challenges of aligning our curriculum with the Common Core, had the old cut points not been changed, only 9 students would have qualified in mathematics for a 1, the lowest score awarded by the state. Instead, because of the new cut points, 109 qualified for remediation. Moreover, and unbelievable as it may seem, of the many 8th grade students who were accelerated in mathematics completed the Algebra 1 regions 1 year earlier than required by the state, and who earned a score of 80 or higher on the Algebra regions, 50% were deemed to be below proficient by the New York State Education Department on another State Education Department created test, namely the 8th grade mathematics assessment. Many students who were notified in September that according to the state, they were in need of remediation had just been notified in June that they were exceptional, as a matter of fact, college and career ready, because they earned 80 and above on the Algebra 1 regions. It's the making of poor mental health for the children and confusion and frustration and anger by the faculty and by the parents. Given the recent expectation that our district field test PARC, the online assessment of the Common Core, it appears that the imposition of PARC is imminent. As you will see in the board's resolution, the destructive impact of increased online testing cannot be overemphasized. The cost of acquiring the necessary technology, infrastructure, and support for PARC is not only prohibitive but destructive. The significant loss of more instructional time to online testing is unjustified, developmentally inappropriate, and refuted by educational research, both nationally and internationally. Levels of student, parent, and faculty stress, frustration, and hostility continue to increase without the additional challenge which online testing will create for different learners, including students, parents, schools, and communities with neither ready access to computers nor opportunities to practice skills which are fundamental to success in an online testing environment. The economic, socioeconomic disparities which currently exist on Long Island and in the state of New York will only be further exacerbated. PARC-related facility utilization and scheduling requirements will be difficult, if not impossible, to implement while schools are in session. Simultaneous online testing across the state while schools are in session will also leave schools and state networks susceptible to shutdown and collapse. The bill for the implementation of Common Core related curriculum alignment requirements professional development necessities, unanticipated and increased student remediation needs, increased supervision demands, park hardware acquisition and infrastructure costs, and facility improvement requirements will continue to be borne by our taxpayers and eventually will be at the expense of other programs which we value highly. I know I'm going on. Our school district, as many on the island, last thing I'll say, has won accolades. Most recently, one of our schools was just named as a blue ribbon school nationally. Our high school has been commended, as many have on Long Island, by national publications. Ironically, for the levels of access and career and college readiness which we provide. We did it all without the Common Core. We only wish we could continue to function that way.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure, go ahead.
Anna, I appreciate everything that you said. I just you made so many points, but I want to talk about Park. Last month, the Board of Regents said that the thing that we will do with Park statewide is we will allow districts to volunteer to be part of the field testing. There is nothing on the horizon in New York State which says that New York State is going to participate in Park. Park has a long way to go. We don't know what the end of Park is going to be, and we are very committed to the new state tests and to their implementation and to their taking root as the standard in New York.
The rest of it, John will get to later. That's the hard stuff.
Good afternoon. I'm Ed Melnick, Superintendent of the North Shore Schools. Again, thank you to Senator Morcellino for setting up today's forum, and thank you all for being here. And certainly all of the statistics can be stated, and as you realize, any change in public education, I've been at this a long time, creates a huge kickback and much concern, much fear. Rather than talking about statistics, I just want to share some personal stories from my district. I've been in the district for 27 years in various positions. And I'm feeling some sadness at some of the loss that I see. We have, for many, many years, had programs that all of our senior students are required to participate in that have to do with interdisciplinary studies for a good third of the day, co-taught. And some amazing things have come out of those programs. Students researched and built, with the support of architects and state education department, a replica of the first one-room schoolhouse in town and are using it as a classroom. In the Long Island Studies program, they researched the housing market on Long Island, and particularly Victorian styles of homes in Sea Cliff, and with their technology and English and history teachers, and again with local architects who volunteer their time in state ed, are building a full-scale Victorian which will serve as a television and recording studio. These are multi-year projects in which the students work with architects, they work with experts in the field. The new facility is going to have geothermal heating and cooling, which they've worked with. These are not the kinds of things that can be measured on the test, but these are incredibly rich project-based learning experiences that require students to use the mathematical, science, humanities information that they're learning in a practical method. We recently had our second graders, between their classroom teachers and our STEM specialists and their art teachers, do a full study of the impact of the closing of the power plant in Glenwood Landing and an environmental impact study and what it would do to the tax rate and so forth. And what I'm finding, and I know that you're in line with beginning with No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top and the required federal statutes in terms of testing, and I know that your hands are tied in many areas. But the suggestion among many of us here in Nassau, fortunately we work in districts that have the ability to provide the resources for these kinds of activities. Secondly, we have high-performing students because of the families that they come from, the socioeconomic background, the educational level of parents. And none of us deceive ourselves about the difference between a district with high-performing students and a high-performing district. and the difference there in terms of our obligation to stretch those students that we have even further, because they'll do fine on the test, basically. And to the degree that we align with the Common Core and value what is on the assessments, and the degree we teach that, our kids will do just fine, and to the degree we don't, they won't do well on those questions. But from the field, and one of my teachers spoke before, I really encourage you to give an ear to some of the extraordinary things that are going on, and perhaps we have a responsibility in not spending so much time preparing for the test, but in partnering with less fortunate districts and sharing some of our best practices. We're happy to, the Nassau Superintendent's Group, the Curriculum and Instruction Committee, has come up with an alternative rubric for a high-performing district that we would love to share with you. And part of that rubric is a responsibility to support lower-performing districts in terms of best practices and so forth. So I really urge, I know that the Common Core is here, I know that the tests are here, but we really need a fine balance to continue to engage students with a passion in authentic project-based learning experiences. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Joanne Loring, and I'm a parent of a preschooler and a fourth grader who was identified as needing gifted and talented services. That comes first. Secondly, I am also a teacher of gifted and talented right here in Oyster Bay, East Norwich. I do appreciate you giving us the opportunity to ask some clarifying questions about the Common Core. I have a two-part question about how the state is addressing gifted and talented learners' needs in relation to the Common Core. The National Association for Gifted Children's website reads, "It has been stated by some that the Common Core State Standards Core does not require any special differentiation for the gifted and may obviate the need for gifted education services since the standards are already high level. Unfortunately, although the standards are strong, they are not sufficiently advanced to accommodate the needs of most gifted learners. As the Common Core State Standard developers have noted, some students will traverse the standards before the end of high school, which will require educators to provide advanced content for them. Beyond accelerative methods, however, there is also need to enrich the standards by ensuring that there are open-ended opportunities to meet the standards through multiple pathways, more complex thinking applications, and real-world problem-solving contexts. This requires a deliberate strategy among gifted educators to ensure the Common Core standards are translated in a way that allows for differentiated practices to be employed with gifted and high-potential students. My first question is, at the state level, how are we ensuring that this work is happening, especially in schools which are no longer able to have gifted and talented specialists? The National Association for Gifted Children website goes on to say, as with all standards, new assessments likely will drive the instructional process. As a field, we must be aware of the need to differentiate new assessments that align with the Common Core State Standards as well. Gifted learners will need to be assessed through performance-based and portfolio techniques that are based on higher level learning outcomes than the new Common Core State Standards may comply. So my second question is, how is the state addressing these gifted and talented learners' special education needs in relation to the New York State assessments? Thank you.
You might exercise some privilege as the moderator. If you would like to weigh in on those two questions at this point in time, that might be worthwhile. Briefly.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, not something that we hear very often. I think most of the conversation on the Common Core is focused on the challenge of helping those students who struggle the most to reach higher standards, as opposed to how to help students who are high performers achieve an even higher level. I'd love to talk, and folks here from the department are talking to, maybe that we need an advisory group to work with us on strategies for how we supplement the Common Core, even though the curriculum modules are optional, how we might supplement that.
I think I'm being told that they're having a hard time hearing you in the back, so if you could
Oh,
use
sorry.
that microphone as close as you can get it.
Sure.
Thank you.
So the short version is it's a good question. We don't get that question very often. Most of the discussion tends to focus on the challenge of helping struggling learners to reach the standards of the Common Core, as opposed to accelerating those students who are gifted and talented. We probably need to look at that, and I think if it might make sense for us to gather a group of educators from around the state who are focused on gifted and talented students to give us advice on how we might supplement the standards and supplement the modules, which, although they are optional, are an important resource that we could probably use to find ways to suggest additional activities that students might go on to. I think there's some of that in the modules, but we probably could use more on that. So that's a very helpful suggestion. So hopefully one of the people here will talk, one of our staff people will talk to you at the end.
I'd like to just add to that. When I was chair of the special ed committee,
Why don't you use the mic? You gotta speak into it.
when I was chair of the special ed committee in Regents, which has now been folded into the P12 committee, we looked extensively at whether or not gifted and talented students should have an IEP just as much as other special ed students, which many of us thought was a good idea. The problem is what constitutes the definition of the gifted and talented student. When we went to the association, there were differing opinions on that, but I do think it's something that we should look at, because I know many of the gifted and talented students are not the highest performing students, because when they get to a school, they are basically washed out of the system because they are not challenged and they don't want to come to school anymore. So we should look at that as a...
Okay, next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is John Castro-Milber. I'm an educator on Long Island, but more importantly, I am a resident of Oyster Bay and the father of an 11-year-old daughter who has a learning disability. So I'm not here today to talk to you about Common Core. I'm not here to talk about APPR. I'm not here to talk about the training, lack of training. I'm not here about any of that. If my daughter could be here, that's who I would have here talking to you tonight. But I'll do it for her. My daughter is a challenged reader. She has difficulty she's 11. She has difficulty in reading. She has difficulty in math. She has difficulty with traditional courses, the day-to-day organization, all the things that go along with a learning disability. She's a talented artist. She loves crafts. She makes rubber band bracelets from morning till night. And she works really hard to do what's expected of her in the classroom. And she does her reading every night, and she wants to study and learn, but she knows she has problems. How do I explain to her what a 1 means? Because I wouldn't even show it to her. She would be devastated. And all the kids know what those things are. They don't really know, which is even worse. But yet, she has a 1 on both. And she will continue to have a 1, most likely, throughout her school career. It isn't what defines my daughter. My daughter's not a 1. My daughter's not a partisan. The point I'm trying to make here is that there's another place for her in education. It's not just about math and reading and science and social studies. Yes, she needs to do all those things and she needs to do them adequately, but she also needs access to other things. And whatever she ends up doing college-wise, there are many places for her. But college ready, there's many different definitions of college ready or career ready. My biggest concern, and that's really why I'm up here today, is I'm so concerned, I am so afraid that the need for all of what's being expected, and I'm not against the rigor by any means, the cost of that requirement, whether you want to tap it as an unfunded mandate or whatever the buzzword is for the day, I am so concerned that it's going to pull funds away from what my daughter needs, and I'm sure a lot of other children. And that's my biggest concern, and I really hope that you would consider in all of your planning going forward how to fund and support the school districts in what we are being required to do. And I understand that you're under the requirements we're under. There's no blame here. We're all in this together, but I want to be in it together. So please, think about these things moving forward, because my daughter and what she needs is not the same as what every other child needs.
John, pay attention to our waiver requests to the federal government over the next couple of months, having to do with testing of special ed and L students.
Yeah,
Pay close attention.
8 years ago, I was in exactly the position you were in, with my 11-year-old reading challenged daughter, and came from the regions that the federal government's requirements required her to take the test at her age level, not at the grade level that she was learning at. And I was devastated. I said, what am I going to tell my daughter, that she's going to fail the test? We know she's going to fail. That's why I think what Meryl said is important. And it's taken years. It's taken years to get the self-esteem.
Someone has to repeat what Meryl said. They didn't hear her. That's the key.
There are certain requirements that are federally mandated about testing under NCLB by virtue of the fact that the congressional branch of our government has been unable to reauthorize NCLB over this past years. Some of those testing requirements, particularly around students who struggle with language or who are learning language, and students with issues around learning differences, have really not gotten any traction in terms of the federal government. New York State and the Board of Regents, this was discussed, I think, 6 weeks ago or more. We put in waiver requests every year to the federal government, and since we have been at the forefront, I believe, of the implementation of the reforms under Race to the Top, I believe we have a give me to ask from the federal government, and that is for them to once and for all, consider our waiver request for testing requirements for students who learn differently.
Just one last point. I'm not...
That doesn't mean that we would support schools that do not give these students academic opportunities to achieve, but we consider it onerous, and we consider it bad practice to test a child at a level that we know they simply will not perform just for the sake of the testing system.
And I appreciate that. And again, I'm not here today to talk about the test. I'm here to talk about making sure that moving forward, there are funds for other things beside testing. Thank you.
I can guarantee there'll be funds for other things besides testing.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Judith Wolanski. I'm the superintendent in Cold Spring Harbor. And Cold Spring Harbor is the kind of district that I think our goal has always been somewhat to fly under the radar. We don't want to be first at anything. And as far as state assessments, our position has always been that the feedback that we get for them should just never be a surprise. That we should have a really good understanding of who our students are as learners, and that if they require help, then we feel that it's our responsibility to provide it. I spent about 2.5 hours last week in trying to explain to a very involved parent body the difference between mean scores, cut scores, scaled scores, and it's a very committed community, a very educated community. But this is simply not their area of expertise, and I had to do a lot of scrambling myself to understand the fact that Cold Spring Harbor actually scored quite well this year, but because of the change in the cut scores, parents received 30% more, as you predicted, received score reports for their children that were 2s and 1s. And at the end of the meeting, and this was before I knew that this meeting would take place, I said if I had the opportunity to speak, the one thing that I would say is that this has so eroded students' confidence in themselves as learners. And when you're an 8-year-old and you have a lot of anxiety about a test that we don't consider to be a high-stakes assessment, but everyone in the community is beginning to think of them as such, it really becomes problematic. And every year I have the privilege of addressing our student body, and I say to them, it's not your GPA that's going to be predictive of your success in life. It's going to be your feelings of persistence and confidence and all of those work habits that we know are so crucial to students. Before I was a superintendent, I had the opportunity to be a director of special education. And when we would identify a student with special needs in the early grades, I would say to the parents, they're going to be fine as long as we can keep their self-esteem intact. Now, in prior years, we used to be able to do that because my teachers knew that this was just a test. But unfortunately, they now have their own sense of anxiety because their rating, which is subject to a parent request, and those requests have begun to come in, so they have their own feelings of self-efficacy. So my comment to you is, Commissioner King, I have heard you speak. The Common Core is such intelligent work. We support all of the initiatives in the Common Core, but my suggestion would be if there's a way for us to kind of slow the train a little bit, give districts time to get their feet wet with this, and really find a way to make everyone comfortable with the process, then I think the rewards will be greater, because I have learned in my many years as an administrator, you have to be more than right. So the Common Core may be right, but we have to find a way to really introduce it so that everyone feels comfortable with it. Thank you so much for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Polanski. I'm the superintendent of the Huntington Union Free School District. I'm going to present from a slightly different perspective, and I'm going to try not to be repetitive here. My district is a little bit different than some of the districts that have had representatives speak earlier today. We have a combined wealth ratio that basically puts us in the mid to high wealth category. However, the diversity in our district is really hidden behind that number. We are probably about 40+% on free and reduced lunch with every ethnic group that you can imagine, and it's something that we genuinely celebrate as a district. And I can reiterate the comments made by those, the 30% decline in scores, and the explaining these scores to parents and students who really don't understand the levels, etc. But I have to tell you, I think one of the most troubling things to me, and the gifted and talented comments that were very insightful, but when you see percentages come out that 3% of English language learners statewide scored at the proficient level, you have a lot of people doubting themselves as to whether or not this is actually going to work for them now or in the future moving forward. And I think the same can be said, eloquently by the gentleman who spoke earlier about students with disabilities, 5 to 6% statewide reaching the proficient level. It's really tough to relay that message with the idea of promise moving down the pathway here, and I think that concerns me greatly, because we do have a significant English language learner population, and we do believe they come to us with the greatest potential to learn, as much potential as anybody else, but when you see those percentages, it really is something that puts our students, our teachers, our administrators, and our parents in a position to say, is this something that's going to work for this district and any other district that's in the same situation? Another concern, I'm going to put my parent hat on for a second. I have a senior in high school who's graduating this year, really did not have to deal with the Common Core as it was rolled down. I know there are states around this country that are rolling out, and they started in kindergarten and went to first grade, second grade, and maybe a decade worth of rollout process here. I applaud the increased standards, I applaud the accountability, but again, the rush to implementation here puts us again behind the 8 ball, no matter what subgroup or what group of students or parents that you're a member of. My senior had a great experience throughout 13 years of school, will graduate this year, will go on to college, and he'll do his thing. My younger one is in 9th grade now, and the stress that's being put on her just almost instantaneously based on the rollout, and we focused a lot on the elementary assessments, but this year we're dealing with the high school assessments, the new integrated out, the Algebra Common Core, the ELA Common Core. There are still modules that haven't been rolled out in terms of algebra that teachers don't have their hands on yet. There's still a lot of questioning out there in terms of exactly how to approach this from the perspective of what can we do to serve our kids best. And that's another concern that I have on the part of not only students but teachers who are really working very diligently to put their kids in the best position to succeed. And the resources, yes, they're there, but they've been rolled out, and we've used the analogy of building the plane while it's flying, and that's my concern. And I know we want to move quickly and raise these standards, but as Dr. Walensky pointed out, just taking a step back, slowing down, and doing this in a manner where it can be implemented with fidelity, I think is something that really needs to be considered here, so that not only our students, our teachers who need, our administrators who need the time to learn this as well, have the time to really put their best feet forward and do this in the right manner. Last point I'll make, and I'll make it briefly, is we've been talking a lot about the Common Core and proper implementation and timeline there. But I do want to just make a quick reference to the annual professional performance review process. We implemented our plan, one-year plan, for the first time last year. And while no one in this room, I can't imagine anyone in this room would argue against accountability and the evaluation process, but I will tell you that the way this process is implemented, and I know that there are components that are locally determined, but the volume of testing that comes along with this process has just added to the anxiety, to the decline in morale, and just to the overall bad feelings about what's going on educationally in New York State across the board.
Here's the microphone. So, Jim,
Yeah.
two things I wanted to ask you. Number one, you know, your child who's a senior, and that brings a lot of anxiety to begin with,
Oh, yes,
because
it
I've
does.
had children who've been seniors before, was in the high school system in New York State when the standards were raised in terms of the attainment of a diploma, a Regent's diploma. Was that impactful on your child's high school career? Or did it seem matter of fact?
It seemed kind of matter of fact, but I can't say the same for every child in that same situation.
Okay, that was thing number one. And thing number two, what were you just talking about?
APPR?
Oh yeah, APPR. I was wondering if the local parts of the assessment, in other words, the 20% that are developed locally, have you ever, as the superintendent, have you ever done sit down and figure out just how many days are required for that local 20% in terms of additional testing? Because from the state testing perspective, I don't think we've added any days. I think the addition has been the local 20.
Correct.
And I know that in different districts, the numbers vary, John.
We have, and I can give you an example. We have adopted a local assessment at the middle school level that does require online administration. It has to be administered in the computer lab, which is limited in terms of the number of students and just in terms of testing, the fidelity associated with the testing. You can only bring so many students into that room at one time. So it does have to add a multiple week staggered process to get all the students in, to test them with the type of environment that we need them to have. And this happens either 2 or 3 times a year, depending on the manner in which the component of the assessment is given. So they're doing this at the beginning of the year, at the very least, and at the end of the year. And this could add up to 4 weeks worth of time, just pulling students in and out of that testing laboratory.
I think what we really need to commit to is a survey around the state of how the testing days have expanded due to the choices that have been negotiated at the local district around the implementation of APPR.
With all due respect, Dr. Tish, we are not left with many options in terms of how we can administer that local component. So, and we are given choices as laid out by the state, whether it's iReady or Ames Web or some or IWEA.
RTI, it's RTI also. It requires 3 times a year.
That's correct. We do.
Probably would have monitored it.
If you could set it up anyway, because there were districts that used NWA before, I assume that's the one.
NWA, yes.
There were districts that used NWA before so many acronyms. There were districts that used NWA before the APPR. In other words, there were districts that used online interim assessments before the evaluation law. If the evaluation law wasn't there, would you still give NWA, do you find it sort of
I'll tell you,
terribly useful or no?
And to be perfectly honest with you, we don't use NWA, we use Ames Web, and we did use it, we had implemented it before we have adopted a K through 6 RTI plan. It was used as a benchmarking system prior to the implementation of the APPR plan. But now we use it more often, and I was using the middle school component as an example because that online, it's also an adaptive assessment, and that assessment is similar to WEA in that it does require a small group in a specific location to be tested at one time, and it does take some time to do that.
So just, if not for the evaluation law and not for the RTI regulations, would you still give? You don't have to answer this question right now if you don't want to, but would you still give Ames Web?
I think we would. We should find it valuable, and there's some, I have no problem sharing that with you, but there are, aside from that, take every grade level and every assessment that's given at the beginning of the year. And again, we have options. I know there are local decisions to be made here, but multiple grade levels, multiple disciplines, we are giving pre-tests, post-tests, and there's a lot riding on this for students and teachers, and ultimately what it comes down to is the anxiety and morale. If teachers are walking in with that belief that this is my professional livelihood is riding on this, and to a certain extent it is, that carries down to the kids. The kids come in with the assessment anxiety to begin with because they're taking more difficult exams and the cut points have changed, and the conversation out there, you may not think a third grader can take some of this in, but they do pull in a lot more than most adults probably give them credit for. The shared anxiety in the classroom and throughout the school communities at this point is I've been doing this for 25 years. I started as a high school teacher. I've never seen it at this high level.
My name is Jay Maddock. I'm a principal at Cold Spring Harbor Junior Senior High School. I want to thank everyone for being here, allowing us this opportunity to share our concerns. I have a couple of comments that I had written down. I want to make sure I didn't forget them when I was up here. As principal of a grade 7 through 12 secondary school, I've been in a unique position to observe firsthand the impact of Common Core assessments and APPR procedures on both our students and our staff. Having been around long enough to remember the heady days of the Regents Action Plan and its ambitious goal of addressing the rising tide of mediocrity, as outlined in the Carnegie Report, I will also be the first to admit that change does not come easily to those of us in public education. And there are those of us, including myself in the field, that have from time to time sometimes resisted or perhaps grudgingly implemented the latest reform. It's only because we've seen so many over such a period of time. However, it would be far too easy and very incorrect for some people to believe today that the current outcry over the impact of the Common Core assessments and teacher evaluations is just another example of a bureaucracy that simply refuses to embrace change. Common Core represents a good faith attempt by state ed to raise the achievement bar for all learners and to encourage authentic learning experiences for children. I'm not here to debate the probability of success for the Common Core standards. It is here, and therefore we must adjust to them. As building and district leaders, that's our job. What continues to trouble me, however, is the ongoing adherence by state ed to a timeline for both student and staff assessments that seems to have been created in a vacuum, where the day-to-day realities of the classroom and the school calendar seem to be just minor inconveniences on the roadmap to implementation. And the supposed infrastructure created by state ed that was promised to provide us with 21st century virtual support, clear directions, and the timely release of student assessment data was clearly not ready to go live before an audience of millions of public school students and staff. As principals, we play the vital role of middle-level management. It's our job to make things work. Yet, we continue to labor with a laundry list of problems that are seemingly out of our control. such as weeks of lost instructional time over the past 2 years due to an inflexible calendar of field testing, baseline testing, or the creation of even more grade level assessments. We need to note, however, that APPR never saw a day of field testing. We labor with written directives from SED that are often lacking in explicit directions that could clarify matters and often leave us more perplexed by the absence of matters not addressed in the correspondence. We labor with being told that we must utilize assessment data for the purpose of identifying students for resource-intensive student support services, only to have the data available to us long after schools have scheduled students for the upcoming school year. This late summer release of student cut scores created some incredible hardships for schools across the state. We also are dealing with the still incomplete development of online curriculum modules to assist schools in addressing Common Core learning standards. And what has been alluded to today, the as of yet unknown impact of all these formal assessments, but I have to put in especially for special needs children. And finally, looking ahead, we now have the promise of redesigned Regents exams on the horizon, which, if created and implemented under the same conditions as have existed these past 2 years, can only lead to more anxiety, frustration, and confusion in our public schools. Thank you.
Just so everybody has a frame of reference, it's about a few minutes after 4. We've been at this for a little more than an hour. In about 15 minutes, I'm going to turn it back to them for comments and rebuttal and responses to as many questions as have been answered. So if you have questions to ask, come to the mics, state them briefly, and then we can get on. Okay? Sorry.
So I hadn't planned on saying anything, but when I heard Jim from Huntington speak about the local assessments and your question, by the way, I'm Lorna Lewis, I'm superintendent in Plainview Bethpage. I had to speak to SLOs. I think that as I look back over the entire process for APPR, if I could point to one area that I would ask the Board of Regents and you, Commissioner King and Chancellor, to reflect on is the whole SLO process. I remember being at the Commissioner's Advisory meeting when we heard it for the first time, and it just was a bad idea. And I would like, I have to say that because I saw SLO turn the entire reform process south. Truly. When I see what happens in my district to kindergarten children in September, the first 2 weeks of school, when the joy of learning is supposed to be in every child's mind. Having to have my kindergarten teachers teach kids how to take a test in physical education, in mathematics, in ELA, in all of the subjects, in art, in music, and spending that time. And you say, well, we don't have to do it. Well, the point is that the way this APPR, we don't have to do all that testing. But the point is that the way that the APPR process was constructed, it requires us to do something with the local assessments. And Dr. King, you said, well, if you did NWEA, would you have to do that? Yes, NWEA speaks to ELA and to mathematics, but it doesn't speak to the other areas. So if there's one thing that I would ask that you take back and reflect on, do we really need to do that? And is there something else that we could do in that whole APPR process that would remove that additional testing and the amount of time that we have put into that? That's one. Because, there's an old rhyme, for one of a nail, the horse was lost. I look at Common Core and I see the really rich, deep thinking and learning that is going on in my districts, and my teachers have rolled up their sleeves and we're doing some really good work. And Common Core may be lost because of all of the other things that are going on around. And then the second thing, when I have Senator Marcelino, I'm going to make a pitch that you do not release sub-scores when you release the composite. That we do not. It is within your power to remove the sub-score argument from the whole discussion. I think it was disingenuous at this time to have the sub-scores as part of a conversation when we promised all of our teachers and all of our principals that only the composite scores will be released. And to introduce that at this time, at a time when accountability is hitting us, with such an ugly pace, to introduce sub-scores into the conversation, I think that you will have tipped the iceberg.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Just on the SLO issue. So setting aside 3012C as the context, if you were starting from scratch,
yes,
and you were trying to figure out for the 7th grade social studies teacher how you would factor in student learning growth into the 7th grade social studies teacher's evaluation. Let's stipulate that, not everyone agrees, but let's stipulate that for the purpose of the question that it's valuable to look at student growth and student learning growth as part of the evaluation process. So if not SLOs, even assuming that you don't have a pretest and you use the final exam for 7th grade social studies to set targets and so forth, how would you ideally construct the inclusion of student performance in the 7th grade social studies teacher's evaluation? Starting from scratch.
In the evaluation of the teacher?
Yeah. Just how would you take
what we did before for the last 150 years. We would do exactly, I'm not doing this, but there is a discipline called teaching, and we would look at the gains. A child comes into 7th grade. 7th grade is American history. We assume that they have somewhat of a limited understanding of American history at the beginning of the year, having only seen it in 5th. And at the end of the year, there will be an assessment, and we would determine if this assessment in my district would be a common assessment across the entire grade level. And we would look at the performance of the students, and the performance of the students could be tied, and should be tied, not could be, but should be tied to the performance of the teacher.
And the judgment about that would be made by the principal?
The judgment about that would be made by quantitative analysis of, that would be just a part of it, but the quantitative analysis of the performance of the students at the end of the year. So that would be
done by the principal, just so I understand.
Well, a quantitative analysis could be done by anyone.
Yeah, but would the principal be sort of judging that? Because the SLO is essentially a quantitative analysis, right? It's saying there's a starting point and goal, and it gets the goal. So would the principal just have the task of kind of looking at that data and deciding? Dr.
King, let me say this.
Yeah.
I have always looked at final assessments. When I was in high school at Southside, we looked at every single teacher's final grades. We did an analysis of the teachers' final grades, and we compared it to other teachers, and we did it over time so that, there are some teachers who will get very limited students because they're pretty good at working with special ed students, so we would fold that into their the performance. We have long looked at quantitative data to see how teachers are doing as part of the puzzle, but we have never done to children what we have done as of last year. It is not good. The SLOs.
But by that you mean just to make sure I understand, But in the
The
7th
big
grade
thing.
social studies class, you would have had a final exam for 7th grade social studies.
Yes,
So
yes, but
it's really the
it's the beginning of the year.
it's the pre-test.
Right, I have physics, I'm an old physics teacher. What do kids know about simple harmonic motion in September? So basically what we're doing is it's a contrived test at the beginning of the year that, of course, kids don't do well on. And then at the end of the year, they take a test, they do better, and so we say there's growth.
And sorry to belabor the point, but I really want to make sure I understand. The prior academic history could be used for the goal instead of the pre-test, but it isn't because why are people, if you don't have to do pre-test, why do people do?
The way, I think it is important for SED to reflect on the way the SLOs were laid out to us. The way it was laid out when you were told you had to do specific tests, that you had to make sure that these tests were a test of comparability. You have to look at that process. If there's one area that I think that you could have some leverage with us on, it's with the SLOs.
Thank you.
Can I ask just a question? How would the rest of the teachers in the district who teach, therefore, the subjects that there are tests for, formal tests, how would they feel, when we started 4th through 8th grade testing?